brother walked into the room and the whole party reorganized itself around him. That's the only way I know how to describe it. People shifted, conversations redirected. My aunt physically turned her back to me mid-sentence to face him, and I stood there holding a glass of sparkling water I hadn't asked for, watching it happen the way you watch weather, like something you understand but cannot stop. His name is Preston. He's 3 years younger than me, and he has been the center of my family's universe since the day he was born. I know how that sounds. Every family has a favorite, people say. You're being dramatic. But let me tell you something about my family specifically, so you understand what I mean when I say it. When Preston was 16, my parents bought him a car. Not a used Honda Civic with a dent in the bumper. A brand new Jeep Wrangler, lifted, custom rims, the kind teenagers post on Instagram. When I was 16, I got a card with $20 in it and a reminder that the SATs were coming up and I should be studying. When Preston dropped out of his second semester of college, my dad drove 6 hours to help him move out, took him to dinner, told him the entrepreneur path was valid and that college wasn't for everyone. When I graduated summa cum laude, my parents sent a flower arrangement to my dorm because they couldn't make the drive. I'm not bitter about the flowers. I kept them until they dried out. What I am is honest. And the honest truth is that I spent the first 29 years of my life being the family's footnote. The responsible one. The one who figured things out quietly and didn't require much. My mom used to say it like it was a compliment. Oh, Vivienne, she's always been so self-sufficient. And everyone would nod like that was a gift I'd been given rather than a role I'd been assigned. I moved to Chicago when I was 22 for a job in commercial real estate. Entry-level, filing contracts, making coffee, learning the industry from the ground up. Nobody in my family thought it was impressive. Preston was doing some drop-shipping business at the time, making maybe $400 a month, and my dad referred to him at Thanksgiving as the entrepreneur of the family. I didn't say anything. I rarely did. What I did was work. I learned how financing worked, how zoning worked, how to read a cap rate, and understand what it meant for a property's actual value versus its listed price. I worked under a woman named Margaret who had built her own firm from 2 agents and a rented desk, and she taught me more about this industry in 3 years than most people learn in 10. I saved money. I invested carefully. I made decisions that had 5- and 10-year horizons rather than immediate payoffs. By the time I was 26, I had bought my first property, a small 2-flat in a neighborhood that most people thought was declining, but that I had studied carefully and believed was about to turn. I rented both units, managed it myself, learned everything that could go wrong and how to fix it. It went right. I bought a second property at 27, a third at 28, this one commercial, a mixed-use building on a street that was quietly being repositioned. I didn't tell my family. It wasn't a secret exactly. It just wasn't a conversation I wanted to have. Every time I talked about my work, the subject changed within 2 minutes. Preston had started a new business venture. Preston was thinking about moving to Austin. Preston needed help with something, and my parents were figuring out how to help him. I let it go. I kept working. The reunion was my grandmother's idea. She turned 75 in September, and she wanted everyone together. Aunts, uncles, cousins, the whole extended mess of us. She'd booked a private event space at a hotel downtown, the kind with a rooftop terrace and a ballroom with floor-to-ceiling windows. My mom called me 3 weeks before to tell me the details, and while she was talking, I pulled up the hotel on my laptop out of habit. I recognized the address. It was one of mine. Not the hotel itself, the building the hotel occupied. I had acquired it 18 months earlier as part of a larger portfolio deal, a mixed-use property with the hotel operating as a long-term commercial tenant. I was their landlord. The event space my grandmother had booked for her 75th birthday was, technically, space I owned. I sat with that for a moment after I hung up the phone. Then I called my property manager and told her I'd be attending an event at that location next month and she didn't need to do anything differently. I drove down on a Friday afternoon. Parked in the garage, took the elevator up, checked into the room I'd reserved. The hotel was nicer than I remembered from the acquisition documents. The lobby had been renovated since I'd last seen the space in person. Good bones, my property manager had said at the time. She was right. The reunion started at 6. I put on a black dress that I'd bought in a small boutique in the West Loop, and that had cost more than my first month's rent in Chicago. I didn't wear it to impress anyone. I wore it because I liked it and I could afford it, and for most of my 20s, I had bought almost nothing for myself because every dollar was going somewhere else. I took the elevator down and walked into the ballroom. My mom saw me and waved from across the room. She looked happy, genuinely happy. And for a moment, I felt the old warmth that has always complicated everything I feel about my family. She hugged me and told me I looked beautiful. I thanked her. Then Preston walked in, and I watched the room reorganize. He came with his girlfriend, a woman named Tessa, who was perfectly nice and had nothing to do with any of this. He was wearing a suit that didn't quite fit, and he had a new watch, the kind people buy to signal something, and within 4 minutes he was at the center of a circle of relatives, listening to him talk about his latest business idea. Something about e-commerce and logistics and disrupting something or other. My uncle found me by the bar. "Vivienne," he said. "Still doing the real estate thing?" "I am," I said. "Good, good." He nodded. Preston was saying he's thinking about getting into real estate too. Maybe you could give him some tips? I took a sip of my drink. "Sure," I said. The dinner was catered, very good, the kind of event where each course arrives timed to the conversation so you're never quite waiting and never quite rushed. My grandmother sat at the center of a long table, glowing, surrounded by people who loved her. Whatever I feel about the rest of my family, I have never had complicated feelings about her. She called me her quiet one, but she said it like it meant something valuable. Halfway through the main course, my dad tapped his glass and stood to make a toast. He talked about my grandmother for a while, which was right and good. Then he talked about the family, about what it meant to be together, about his pride in what everyone was building. He mentioned Preston twice, the new venture, the Austin move that was still being planned, the entrepreneurial spirit that reminded him of himself at that age. He did not mention me. I cut my steak and ate it. After dinner, people moved toward the terrace. The night was warm enough for it, and the city spread out below in that way Chicago does. Generous, enormous, lit up like it has nothing to hide. I stood near the railing, and my cousin found me. She's a few years older than me, works in healthcare, has always been the person in this family I could actually talk to. "He really didn't mention you," she said. "It's fine. It's not fine." "No," I agreed. "It's not. But it's consistent, at least." She laughed a little. Then she looked out at the city. "I don't know how you do it," she said. "I would have said something years ago." "I've been busy," I said. Preston appeared beside us before she could respond. He loosened his tie and was in the good mood he always gets when he's been the center of attention for several hours. "Vive," he said. "Good to see you. You look good." "Thanks. Still renting apartments or whatever?" I looked at him. "Something like that." "You should really think bigger," he said. It wasn't mean exactly. It never was. That was always the thing. He wasn't trying to diminish me. He genuinely had no concept of what I was doing because no one in this family had ever looked closely enough to find out. Like, the real money in real estate is in commercial development. "Have you thought about that space?" "I have," I said. "I've been researching it actually, for my next thing. There's a lot of opportunity if you know what you're looking for." I nodded. He moved on to someone else a few minutes later. My cousin looked at me. "Commercial," she said. "He's going to get into commercial." "Ah, Vivienne, what are you not telling me?" I turned and looked at the building, the rooftop terrace we were standing on. The hotel below us, with its renovated lobby and its good bones. I thought about my property manager's voice on the phone, steady and competent. I thought about 18 months of lease reviews and maintenance coordination and the quiet, unglamorous work of owning something real. "You know this building?" I said. My cousin looked at me. "This hotel, this whole property." I nodded at the space around us, the terrace, the windows, the ballroom below where my grandmother was still holding court. "I own it. Well, I own the building. The hotel is a tenant. We acquired it as part of a portfolio about a year and a half ago." She stared at me. "My grandmother booked the event space," I said, "which is in a building where I collect the rent. I found out when my mom called me with the address." The silence lasted about 4 seconds. Vivienne, I know. Your dad just made a toast and didn't say your name once, and you are literally the landlord of this building. I know. Have you told anyone? I'm telling you. She put her hand over her mouth. I couldn't tell if she was going to laugh or cry. Honestly, I wasn't sure which was more appropriate. Why didn't you say anything? You could have said something at dinner. You could have said something when your dad was standing there talking about his logistics disruption thing, or whatever. I know. So, why didn't you? I thought about it. The real answer, the one I'd spent years arriving at, wasn't dramatic. It wasn't about waiting for the perfect moment or planning some reveal. It was simpler than that. Because it doesn't matter if they know, I said. It never did. She looked at me for a long moment. That's either the healthiest thing I've ever heard, she said, or the saddest. Probably both, I said. We stood there for a while. The city below us didn't care about any of this, which I have always found comforting. What happened next was not something I planned. My dad came out onto the terrace looking for Preston, and when he found me instead, he stopped and said, "There you are," in the tone he uses when he's surprised I exist. He asked if I was having a good time. I said yes. He looked out at the view and said something about what a nice place this was, that my grandmother had done well picking it. It is nice, I said. You know what this kind of property goes for? He said. He does this, a habit of asking questions he already has an answer to. The commercial real estate market in this city is intense. I was reading about it. Preston is actually Dad, I said. He stopped. I own this building. He looked at me the way people look when they hear a sentence that doesn't parse. What? The building we're in. I acquired it 18 months ago. The hotel is a commercial tenant. I own the property. He was quiet for long enough that I could hear the party noise floating up from inside. The whole building, yes. He looked around the terrace, at the windows, down at the street, back at me. Why didn't you tell us? It was the question I knew was coming. I had thought about how to answer it for years, not specifically about this moment, but about the larger version of this question. Why don't you ever share what you're doing, Vivienne? Why are you so private? Why didn't we know? I did tell you, I said. I told you I worked in commercial real estate. I told you about my first property when I bought it. Mom changed the subject. You asked how Preston was doing in the same conversation. He opened his mouth. I'm not angry about it, I said. I'm really not. But I stopped explaining things because no one was listening, so I just kept working. He was quiet for a long time after that, long enough that I thought he might not say anything at all, which honestly would have been fine. Then, how many properties? 7, I said. Across 4 buildings. 2 residential, 2 commercial. This is the largest. He looked at me the way I had always wanted someone in my family to look at me. Not with pity, not with the complicated embarrassment of having underestimated someone, just with the plain shock of seeing something clearly for the first time. Vivienne, he said. Dad, I didn't know. I know. He didn't say sorry. I don't think he had access to that word in that moment. But he stood beside me at the railing for a while, looking out at the city, and something in the air between us was different. Not fixed, not resolved, just different in the way that facts make things different. Preston found us eventually. He could tell something had shifted, and he looked between us with the slightly anxious energy he gets when he's not sure what's happening. What's going on? My dad looked at me. A beat passed. Then he said quietly, Did you know your sister owns this building? Preston's face went through several things at once. What building? This one, my dad said. The whole property. She's the landlord. Preston looked at me. I looked back at him. I don't know what I was expecting. Anger, maybe, or the defensive bluster he sometimes reaches for. Instead, he just said, For real? For real, I said. He took a breath, looked at the floor of the terrace, looked at the city. Huh, he said. And then, because Preston has never been malicious, careless, yes, incurious, yes, but not malicious, I feel like kind of an idiot. You didn't know, I said. I should have asked. It was the closest he'd ever come to an apology. It wasn't much, But it was real, and I filed it somewhere in myself as a small, genuine thing. My grandmother found me before the evening ended. She always finds me. She has a radar for the person in the room who is doing something quietly and getting no credit for it. Maybe because she spent decades being that person herself. She took my arm and walked me to a corner near the terrace door and looked at me with her sharp, assessing eyes. "Your father looks like he swallowed something interesting," she said. I laughed before I could stop myself. I may have told him something he didn't know. "About the building?" I stopped laughing. "I asked about the venue when I was planning," she said. The property management company responded. I looked up the ownership. She patted my hand. "I wasn't sure you wanted everyone to know." "You knew?" "For about 6 months. And you didn't say anything. It wasn't mine to say." She looked at me. And in her eyes was everything she had never needed words for. The particular steadiness of a woman who had seen her family clearly for decades and chosen, deliberately, what to say and when. "I'm proud of you. I've been proud of you for a long time." My throat tightened in a way I hadn't expected. "You're the only one who ever said that." "I know," she said. "That's something they'll have to work out for themselves." I stood with her for a while after that. The party wound down gradually the way family events do, in pieces, with long goodbyes, with promises about the next time. My mom hugged me at the end and held on a beat longer than usual, and I don't know if my dad had said something to her or if she just sensed a shift. She looked at me and started to say something, then stopped, then said, "We should talk soon." "Okay," I said. I took the elevator up alone. The building was quiet above the party floor, the way buildings get late at night, like they're resting. I walked down the hall to my room and stood at the window for a while. The city doesn't care about my family's dynamics. It doesn't care what my dad said in a toast or what my brother assumed about my career. It runs on its own logic, buildings and leases, and the slow, unglamorous work of owning things and maintaining them and making them worth something. That was always the thing I understood that nobody gave me credit for understanding. It doesn't have to be loud to be real. I flew home the next morning. My property manager texted that week with a routine update, a lease renewal on one of the residential units, a minor repair in the commercial lobby that had been handled. Nothing that required my attention. I texted back, "Sounds good." My dad called that Friday. We talked for 40 minutes, the longest phone conversation we'd had in years. He asked questions, real ones, how the portfolio was structured, what the process looked like when I acquired a property, whether I had a team or managed most of it myself. He listened to the answers. He didn't change the subject. At the end, he said, "I should have paid more attention." "Yeah," I said, "you should have." We left it there. It wasn't a reconciliation. It was a beginning of something, maybe. Or not. Either way, I had built what I had built, and it was standing, and it would still be standing regardless of what he did with the information. Preston texted me 2 days later. "Hey, can I ask you something about commercial real estate, like how you actually got started? If that's okay?" I looked at the text for a while. Then I wrote back, "Sure. Call me this weekend." He did. We talked for an hour. He had real questions mixed in with some that showed how little he still understood. But he was asking, and he was listening to the answers. And somewhere in the middle of the conversation, I thought, this is the first time we have ever talked about something that is mine. It wasn't enough. Years of being footnoted in my own family can't be cleared with a phone call and a few questions asked in good faith. But it was something. It was the door opening, just a crack. My grandmother called a week later to thank me for coming. "I hope it wasn't too much," she said. "It was fine," I said. "It was good, actually." "Good." A pause. "The terrace was beautiful." "It really was," I said. She laughed, and I laughed, and for a moment, everything was lighter than it had been in a very long time. I still work the same way I always have. Early mornings, careful analysis, decisions with long time horizons. I still do not announce what I'm doing, mostly because the work itself requires quiet more than recognition. But I have stopped disappearing from conversations. I have stopped letting subjects change without saying what I came to say. The last time my mom called and started talking about Preston's new project, before she asked how I was doing, I waited for a breath and then said, "Mom, ask me about my week first." She paused. "Of course," she said. "How was your week?" And I told her. There's something nobody tells you about being the invisible one in your family. They let you believe that being overlooked is a permanent condition, like it's written into you, fixed, the way eye color is fixed. And for a long time, I believed it too. I thought the way my family saw me was the truth about me. It wasn't. What I've come to understand, slowly and without any dramatic revelation, is that the way people treat you says almost nothing about your actual worth, and almost everything about where their attention is pointed. My parents pointed their attention at Preston, not because he deserved it more, not because I deserved it less, just because he was louder, and loud things are easier to see. I spent years being quiet. I don't regret it. The quiet is where the work got done. But here's what I've had to sit with. Being quiet is only a virtue if you're still moving. There's a version of invisibility that's strategic. You keep your head down, you build, you let the results speak eventually. And then there's a version that's just disappearing. For a while, I confused the two. I told myself I was being strategic when sometimes I was just hiding from the conversation I didn't want to have, hiding from the version of my family that might look at what I'd built and still not care. The thing about Preston standing on that terrace, saying, "I feel like kind of an idiot," it wasn't a win for me. I want to be honest about that. It didn't feel the way I thought it might feel if someone in my family ever really saw what I'd accomplished. It just felt true, like a fact finally getting acknowledged after being ignored too long. Relief, maybe. Not triumph. My grandmother already knew. She'd known for 6 months and said nothing, because she understood that it was mine to tell. That's the kind of intelligence that doesn't come from information. It comes from watching people carefully for a long time and respecting what you see. She built that in herself over decades. I want to build that in myself too. What I keep coming back to is this. The effort you put in when no one is watching is the most honest effort you will ever make. When my dad was giving toasts that didn't include my name, I was making decisions that would compound quietly for years. Not to spite him, just because the work was real and the work was mine and it didn't require his attention to be worth doing. That's not something anyone taught me. I had to learn it the hard way, through years of being the person in the room that everyone forgot to introduce. But I think it's the most useful thing I know. You don't need to be seen to be building something real. You don't need permission to take up space. And you don't need the people who underestimated you to apologize before you decide to keep going. My dad called me the Friday after the party and asked real questions for the first time. My brother texted and wanted to learn. My mom asked about my week before launching into someone else's story. Small things. But they were real, and they happened because I finally stopped making myself smaller to fit what they expected. I'm not the family footnote anymore. I'm not sure I ever actually was. I just stopped letting that be the story.